Welcome to In or Out, the show from the European Ultimate Federation talking about the European Ultimate Club Series rankings. I'm Ravi Vasudevan, and we got a great show. First time we're coming back to you since Elite Invite, and we've had a bunch of tournaments, especially not least of which was Windmill this past weekend. So we'll dig into all the rankings and see which teams are in, which teams are out. It's going to be awesome. We got Marcha Culin, data scientist and captain from Women, that's going to come on the show with us in a bit. Very excited about that. She knows everything about the math. She knows everything about Elite Ultimate, so great guest to have here for In or Out. Before we get into that, a little bit of housekeeping, just to remind everybody that roster moves are still allowed, and we're going to actually show in the show a little bit about who's moved so far in the transfer window. They're only allowed until July 15th, though, so if you want to switch teams at all, make sure you get that all sorted out before July 15th, because once that's done, rosters are all locked down and no one can move around. So if you want to get some last-minute pickups for UCF, this is your last chance. Another note here, from July 1st, all the previous EUCS games will be free to watch on the streaming platform. So if you want to go back and scout teams from Spring Tour and Elite Invite, that'll be all free for everyone, regardless of your subscription level. And the last thing I want to note is there's a new feature on the ranking app. We'll get into showing that later, but there's now an event tab. It got introduced a little bit later, but a lot of people have been asking us, do you know which team is coming to this tournament? Can we figure out, who's going to be going? Now you can just go to that event tab, pick the division you want to look for on the left, just like with all the rest of the ranking app, and then type in that event's name, and you'll be able to see which teams have signed up for it, so if that's something that interests you. Okay, that's it for notes at the top. Let's bring in our guest, Marcha. Again, as I said before, Cap Recruit Women, who just had a great final at Windmill yesterday. Longtime player for the Dutch women's team and a data scientist. Marcha, how are you doing today?
Tired, but happy. Thanks for having me, Ravi.
Yeah, so I want to talk first before I get into all the boring math stuff, Windmill and how it all went. Yeah, you had the crazy epic final with the amazing Aurora Leshnik layout block that has taken the Instagram and TikTok by storm everywhere. What was it like to play in that tournament and play in that game? I know you've won the tournament before, first time playing in the women's division, I guess. What was the weekend like for you?
Yeah, it was a great weekend. We had high expectations as well because we did pretty okay at Tom's tourney. We also already felt as a team that we had improved a lot, so we're just really curious also to finally have the chance to match up against some better teams. And Tom's tourney we faced Germany and GB, but now also finally got the chance to play against Jinx, which was really fun. Met them in a super windy, rainy game on Saturday, the 45-minute one. Then we got out the strongest, so we're really excited also for that final. And we're mostly just really happy that we played, I think, some really good ultimate. Started a bit messy, but as always in a final, there's a lot of pressure. But mostly super proud that we managed to really stick together as a team, also come back after being behind. And it's just amazing to be on such a team with so many athletic stars who do crazy things. And like having this big audience there for extra dramatic effect, that is also really impressive when you're on the field. Just really enjoyed that. Even though we lost, we cried a bit at the end, but at the end, I think it was really close. So sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, and it's good motivation for next year, and for sure for finals. We hopefully get a rematch, so still more time to train. So I'm confident about that.
Yeah, we'll see. Do you have any tips? I think in all three finals, according to the Windmills ranking algorithm, you all were the favorites, but I think going into the tournament, most people were considering Jinx the favorite out of that matchup. So in the other two finals, also the sort of favorite team went up huge, and the other teams weren't able to bring it back as close as you were. Any tips for what to do if you're down in a hole? Like how did you rally yourselves to get to back in there? Because it's super tough if you're playing against a team that is like better than you and you're down a bunch and you still have to find some belief. What are some things that you did to get yourselves there?
Yeah, well, the biggest difference that I also noticed when watching the other games, I think we put a lot of effort in being loud and bringing that energy.
Hmm.
And I think that really helps with keeping your confidence high. We put a lot of effort also in talking to each other and making sure that we know that we trust each other. And it's really hard in these finals because you're really trying to not make any mistakes. But if you're trying not to make mistakes, it's just gonna get worse, you know. So
Hmm.
it's really a mental game, and I think that's what some of our team has a lot of experience with. We've played many finals, we've lost some finals, won some finals. So we've been trying to pass that experience along as well. And also by having this experience of um, having done that already, right, in previous finals, to be able to come back, and you have this belief that it's possible. So we actually never thought it was over when I think it was 8-5 at halftime.
Hmm.
But if it's that close, you just know you got to come back. You're gonna get your chances, and just take it point by point and don't stop believing. That's the only thing I
Nice.
can say, and figure out ways how to keep that confidence and to bring that energy.
And to bring it a little bit to the EUCS mentality, you all were counting this tournament for the EUCS. Actually, many teams that were there didn't. Actually, the women's division had the most teams out of any of the divisions, even though it was the smallest team. The smallest division had the most EUCS teams in any division. Um, you also had Paula Boss playing with you, also a member of the EUF competition committee, so we know them very well.
Yeah,
But of course, they on the EUCS season are rostered for Yaka, and this is very much allowed. We made this very, very, very well known that you can go to an EUF approved event with somebody else, and I know Paula trains with y'all. So, but they can't play in any of the EUCS games. This is one of those compromises that we did to try to make things as flexible as possible for teams. I'm curious if you can speak to how that itself went for you. I mean, having a strong player that you got to add to for this Windmill experience, but then yeah, they had to kind of sit on the sidelines for the final. What was that like?
yeah, it was a new thing to think about beforehand, because they play with us and train with us for the season. Same as Isa Monka, by the way, also training with us, playing for Wind Cup. So it was a bit of a discussion beforehand, like, are we gonna play Windmill as EUCS tournament or not? Because we like these players to play with us as well. But at the same time, not being a women's team last year, so not playing Elite Invite, we also needed these games.
Mm-hmm.
And Paula was actually really taking initiative in that as well, like, because they were taking initiative also in telling us, like, yeah, I'm really okay with that if you do this, because yeah, it just needed maybe. So you would be stupid if you don't do it. So
Sounds like Paula.
yeah, so yeah, exactly. So that went pretty good. So and then during the tournament, it's known already, so there's not really an issue. It was mostly sad for Paula that we at the end they could only play 4 games, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And especially to miss out on the final, it sucks.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really great to have their support on the sideline. I think they put all their frustration on the field as well, so and helped us in that way.
Well, it's interesting for them get in their head because of maybe I don't know what they would want. I guess maybe if you could take Jinx down a peg, Yaka would have a chance to go to the first seed. So maybe I don't know where they're if they were even thinking at all about the ranking levels. But maybe she did too well that you could jump over Yaka. So maybe probably they just didn't care and just wanted to play. It just cheered on the
Yeah,
sideline.
yeah, yeah.
But some people are overthinking this algorithm. Some people are just still playing Ultimate. I think that's something we need to figure out. One thing from the EUF we're trying to figure out is, at least me, I've talked about this on the show a few times, but surprised how few teams are counting the other big tournaments. I thought that teams going to Tom's and Windmill would surely want to get as many games in the system as possible, but it seems for various reasons, maybe some are scared to lose their ranking if they're hungover on a party tournament day or whatever, or that some of them are just saying, no, we want to have some tournaments where we can be a little less pressure. Some of them like thinking from a system point of view, some of them thinking from a season point of view. I don't know, but I would like to find a way to incentivize more teams to count more games, because the more games we have in the system, the more accurate the ranking is, and the more interesting the season goes. So it's something for us to think about for next year. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I mean, so you've gone to Tom's Tourney and Windmill. You decided to count both of them, but it was a big discussion on your team. How are you finding that balance? So forgetting everything else of forgetting the Palabas situation, but in general as a team, figuring out how to plan your season with this new structure.
In general, what I really like is that this European season is longer now, because beforehand it felt like, okay, we're playing some games, then there's one important weekend, and that's it. So this system makes the European season way more interesting. So that's really nice. What we've been struggling with mostly is also going to international tournaments is costly. It costs money. We have quite some young people. So for us, that's the main reason why we're really counting Windmill and Tom's, trying to avoid going to more tournaments that cost money.
Yeah. There's no other Dutch women's teams, so you're not going to get games in the country.
Yeah, exactly. So and other teams can play nationals or whatever. So for us, that's really the choice. We would have loved to play more, but yeah, sometimes also just limited time, limited money. And what's really interesting is having these tournaments like Elite Invite, where there's like really only good teams. That's just super fun to play. Also the best learning experience, best preparation, but also the most fair way, the most fair competition, I would say. So yeah.
Cool. So one more thing. Grutz has transitioned from mixed to single gender this year. I think you've played most of your competitive career. I mean, on the national team side, you've played in women's, but on the club side, you've played in mixed most of the time. What's your feeling going from one division to the other? What are some differences you feel or whatever there?
Yeah, it's definitely very different. Like both, haven't figured out yet which one I like more.
Okay.
I mean, what's really interesting about mixed, if you play in a good mixed team, I would say, it's just way more complex. Like the timing is different because you have these speed differences between men and women. It's faster. You have to be way more smart. In women, there's way more space. So what I really like right now is we get to play different types of roles in the team. So our handlers who have to take a more dominant role, where in mix we had Bernard and Tom Lasman, for example, taking really active roles. And now everything has to come from the female handlers. So that's a big change and really nice learning opportunity. Same for the cutters. It's just also really different timing. For example, what I really love is I can just run deep all the time and there's no guy in the way. So when I mix, I did that as well, but it's just you have to time it just way better, and you guys really have to make space. So that's also an interesting component. So yeah, I'm not sure yet. I really like that we made the switch because it's also been really fun to finally play some different teams, get to play some amazing other players that we haven't played much before. And I think also as individual players, we've been growing a lot just by having these different experiences.
Yeah, I mean, it's not shy to say, sorry to people, but I guess that there's a little more depth in the single gender divisions. There are more teams at your level. When Krut was playing, I mean, you would play not that many competitive games in the season, let's say, and now I think you're playing quite a few more.
So that's really nice. Because I think last year we had one tight game, which was the final, and that one we lost. So those seasons are a bit frustrating. And this year we've already played quite many competitive games, really close ones. So yeah, you're right.
Cool. All right, and I guess the last thing before we go into the current rankings, since you are data scientists and are a bit more math brained than a lot of the other guests we've had so far on the show. I'm curious if you had a chance to look at the algorithm and what your sort of the thoughts are in, yeah, do you think this is a good way to rank teams? So yeah, like the goal is to figure out who the top 16 are. We said we wanted to throw out regionals and stop having all games to go, but go to a sort of ranking algorithm. From a competitive athlete and math brained person, what are your thoughts about the system as a whole from the math side?
Yeah, I was happy you prepared me for this because usually I'm the type of person who just shows up at the tournament and doesn't have a clue what to do. I'm just playing.
So you keep those things separate, your math and frisbee stuff.
Yeah, exactly. This is where I shut off my brain. No, so I did my studying today. I looked at the algorithm. So I think I understand it now. But maybe first from athlete's point of view, well, first of all, I think it's already way more representative than what we had before, which was just like based on regionals. Then you're dependent on the game, like the teams in your region. And for us, it usually meant that we would have one interesting weekend where you're really playing the top teams. And then everything comes down to that one weekend. And you also don't really get the chance to measure up with teams before, unless you're going to Windmill, for example. So making that a longer season already makes it feel way more professional. So really loving that. I mean, ideally, you would just play against every team and have every game count, but I mean, we can't make that happen either. So I think it's a nice balance between like still playing more games, making it fair, and also make like accommodating teams. For example, like we have with Grut this season. Like last year, we were in the women's team. So if you would just count like also previous performance and have like the top teams in some division, it would take us some years until we got there. And this way, you accommodate that teams in Ultimate change a lot, and how good teams are in a year might vary a lot. So I really like that all this ranking is done within the season, so it's most representative, and that you also have the best teams at finals, which also makes it fun for the players, makes it fun to watch. So yeah, I think that's really good. From algorithm perspective, yeah, I mean, an algorithm is always approximating something. So you always have to make some choices. I think what's happening now, for example, to us is that if you have played teams that are lowering your ranking, like it's harder to really get rewarded for being the better team because of this algorithm. I think it's really fair if you play against teams that are closer to you. So that would be the ideal situation if we could find a way that we still have that everyone has enough games against teams that are in similar strength. Because I think if we manage to do that, this algorithm works really well. On the other hand, I think especially in European Ultimate, there is still quite some differences in level. So I don't think the few downsides that might make it like not that the approximation not that good. The approximation is still good enough to be fair. Like the way it's balanced, yeah, I think it's fair. Especially like the fact that you can also take into account games against worse teams and not just excluding them. So finding the balance between making it easy for teams to make games count, but also have a fair representation. So yeah.
So what do you think specifically about a couple of things? So like the Windmill ranking algorithm is just a linear regression on the point diff, and every
Mm-hmm.
point difference is exactly the same. Whereas this algorithm has some sort of like, it goes from the points that are at the close games count. The differences in like a 15-14 versus 15-13 is a pretty big difference, whereas 15-8 versus 15-7 is a small difference, and it kind of curves out like that. Which of those two do you think is more fair for making a ranking algorithm like this, counting everything the same linearly, or having that sort of curve that we're using?
Hard question.
Yeah.
There's something to say for both sides. What I think is good about capping it is also that these blowouts, like sometimes you just don't have your day. And
Mm-hmm.
then if you happen to lose 15-0 or whatever, or for example, it's super windy and your team can't play with wind, but maybe you're super good and there's no wind. Like um, maybe that like would exaggerate the effect. Um, so I think it's good there's some cap. On the other hand, it makes it harder if you play not that many teams who are good, but play against some teams that are lower ranked than you. Then it's harder to make that distinction to
Mm-hmm.
to get that many points. So um, yeah, having that 15-7, 15-6 cap. Um, yeah, not
Yeah.
sure what to think
Not
about
sure. You
it.
can see the positive sides. Um,
As the real mathematics answer, it depends.
always the answer. Okay, then I think we've done enough math talk. Let's go. Oh, sorry, we still have a couple more things we got to note off before the ranking. We go into the actual ranking, which is the pre-ranking talk. Um, One thing we got to note to our viewers and listeners is that one significant change that happened this since the last show is that there was actually a game during Spring Tour between Frub and Rangers, the Padova Rangers, that we actually removed from the ranking algorithm. And what actually happened was there was a sort of lightning delay, and the Frub, I'm not going to go into all the details, but Frub left a bit earlier than was required of them. And it was sort of a miscommunication. And then points got assessed when they came back. And in the moment, the EUF said that was the right thing to do. But then after we heard from both sides later on, we figured out that it was actually more of a miscommunication than like anything malicious. So we thought that assessing points against Frub for leaving the fields when they thought it was dangerous for them, even if everybody else disagreed, we thought that was too harsh, and we decided that the only fair thing to do was to remove that game from the rankings because it actually did impact things. So if you look back in the app, back to all the previous rankings, we had to rerun them, and the mixed division did get shifted around quite a bit because of that. So if you're curious what happened there, that was it. Another note was something that was discussed was that 3SB women were slated to be in Windmill, make the games count, and in the deadline they had a roster in, and then I think a day before the tournament they contacted the UF saying, "Oh, this was a mistake. We weren't supposed to be in." And we looked at it very closely with many people involved to see what actually happened. And part of it is that I'm on the Windmill committee as well, and I looked at their application for Windmill back in February, and in that application they specifically said that they don't want it to count as a UCS in February. So we decided that we agreed that it was probably some kind of clerical error, that they accidentally submitted their roster when they weren't supposed to. Something mismanagement happened at the team. So we allowed them to come out of the tournament. That was more of a thing for this year because we decided to be a bit more flexible with teams since it's a new system to everybody. Next year we might not be as forgiving, so please don't think that this is something we're going to do all the time. And sorry to teams that were expecting those games to count and at the last minute they didn't, but we're all trying to learn this new system right now. Another couple things that happened were Windmill, actually a Saturday morning, because of rain and all the grass fields were canceled. They had to make the rounds 45 minutes. And those rounds were the EUCS rule is that tournaments that want games to count have to make their games 60 minutes or higher. Otherwise, the games don't count towards the ranking. We had to make a last minute decision. I was there at Windmill. I was actually at that captain's meeting where they explained the 45-minute thing, and then I took all the UCS teams with me, called up Nemo, and we decided that since this was not in the control of the players, the games would count. And so yeah, we made that decision there. On the flip side of things, UKU regionals, before the tournament started, not due to weather, but due to the fact that they had a different number of teams than they expected, decided to change their pool play games to be 50 minutes. And that was something that we didn't think. That was the tournament deciding to make games shorter, not due to weather. So in that case, we actually said those games don't count. So it's a bit weird. Maybe people can think it's inconsistent, but we're all trying to figure this out. And we're all going to meet in July as the competition committee to decide how we deal with these things in the future. But any feedback is very welcome. So, yeah. One more thing is look at the transfers. So maybe Nemo can pull up the transfer graphic we have on the screen. So as you know, since I believe it's right after Elite Invites, I think it was May 15th to now, teams are allowed to shift from one team to the other. So you can see here all the players that have moved so far. It's not that many, actually. Teams are only allowed to take in, I believe, 5 transfers in mixed and 3 transfers in open. And you can see here Fabulous from Switzerland making great use of the transfer system, taking in 4 players already. Malmö Ultimate Club also taking in 3 players. You see there Drew Lee, the co-captain of my team, UFO, going over to Hrut. That was his plan the whole year, to play the early season with us and then play the finals part with Hrut. So we saw him go. And you see the Big Easy seems to be losing players left and right. Not sure what's going on in Austria, but seems like everyone's transferring over to the mixed division from the Big Easy. That's the transfer window. And the last thing to notice is teams getting their 10 games in, and we'll get into that when we look into the ranking and see which teams are struggling to do that. So now, here we are. We've talked enough about everything else. Let's dive into the ranking. So Felix, why don't you pull up my app here, and we can look and see what's going on. We'll start, as we usually do, in the mixed division, and look and see who's in and who's out. First thing we do is look at the table, and you see here a couple of changes. One of which is this Heck team, I believe from Edinburgh, sitting there in second place. And that might seem crazy to lots of people. And why are they sitting there in second place? Well, they only have one game in the system. They played Glasgow at UK Regionals, and Glasgow went 6-0 at their spring tour, so they were sitting themselves at second place. And since the algorithm could only place them relative to Glasgow so far, since they beat Glasgow, they ended up slotting right on top of them. And I don't know if that result's going to hold. I don't know if that ranking's going to hold. It's really weird to have a team with one game in the system here because they haven't played they're only going to play Summer Tour as an EUF tournament. But Heck sitting there at second place. We'll see if they can hold on to that. As we go down from Heck, Glasgow, Mosquitoes, Lemmings, who won the Elite Invite, actually sitting there at 5th place, which I think is very interesting. Deep Space, Seskidistis, Padova Rangers, who didn't have the best Windmill. I think they might have dropped a couple spots. Puck from Paris, Pelt from Ireland, Reading, Heroes Flying Disc from Hungary, Nulacht sitting there at 6 and 6, and then right after the cutoff between the spots that are guaranteed to get you spots and the spots that might lose them because of wild cards in the summer is Zoom Ultimate from Turkey. They played Turkish nationals and they won. I think that they were 2-0, so they actually were kind of in their own little bubble in the ranking algorithm. So that of course propelled them high. But they also went to Windmill and had a couple games there. And so because of those games, they ended up keeping their ranking pretty high. So they're sitting there at 14th. Pretty nice for a Turkish team. Sky this Warsaw from Poland, Malmo from Sweden. That rounds out the top 16. And then just below that, we've got Frub, the aforementioned team, Mancho, BN1, Tartu Turbulence, and that's the top 20. So, Maartje, you've played in this division before. What are your thoughts looking at this top 20, or any records you'd want to dig a little bit more into, or see anything a little bit more? What do you think you see here?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm really curious about is about Deep Space, because last season they were really good. I see them now in 6th place. Lost 3 games, I see.
Yeah, so we can look at their games, and we can actually look at their sorting by game rating to see which games are going the best for them. So their best win of the season was beating Seskidistis 15-10, and they do have some games that aren't so good. They beat another team from Hungary who was nowhere near the top 20. They only beat them on Universe. That was actually their worst game of the season, losing to Lemmings, who won the Elite Invite, 11-14. And then, yeah, they have a loss to Mosquitoes. I think that was at Spring Tour. 11-12, lost to TFC Tauscher, also at Spring Tour. So not feeling like the on top guaranteed favorites to win this season. And when it all comes down to it, they're only ranked 6th. So anything else jump out to you from remembering playing any of these teams? I mean, this TFC Tauscher is a new team from Munich. They've decided to go to mixed for the first time. Seem to be leading things up there with their 6-0 win in Spring Tour.
Yeah, I was about to say I don't really know them, so
Yeah, they're a new team this year, just like you all in the women's division. So
nice.
So we can.
Well,
one
then,
thing I like to do is look
yeah,
at the limits between matching up. So we have Nulocked and Zoom, and you can see that's a very tight window there. But we have this nice little tool where we can take a look and see to compare the team that are just on the border. So again, Zoom is still possibly qualifying with their ranking, but if wildcards go outside the top 16, they might lose it. You see they have a rating difference of 7.22, and again, remember that a universe point win is 125 points. So 7.22 is a pretty narrow margin, and we even make an expected score, although this algorithm is not supposed to be predictive. It's supposed to be like rewarding and assessing the season rather than predicting the next game. We do put this expected score here for fun. And if it was 14.99, we would still write that here. So when it says a draw, that means it's closer than a 14.99 to 15 game. So very, very close, range within margins. Probably any individual point of any individual game would have swayed things in either direction here. You see they don't have any mutual opponents, but I now have a feature where we can unclick this and look at teams individually. So if you ever want to compare two teams and just see what they look like next to each other, you can do that. And I also added recently, since the last show, this new plot feature where you can compare teams, and we'll give it a second to draw the plot. And you can see each team in all their games along with their average to see exactly how much they look. And you can see here that Nulocked has some games that are way higher than the best games of Zoom, but also a couple games that are lower. So a bigger spread in their average. And of course, Zoom doesn't have as many games, so we'll see how they hold out there. So a couple ways to compare two teams. That was the cutoff between green and blue, so guaranteed in versus maybe in. And then from the top 16 out, we can compare Malmö and Frub, see what that looks like. So also a draw. Wow, 1.38. And at the moment, that's incredibly tight. And that could be the difference between going to the EUCF or not going to the EUCF. So pretty crazy stuff here. You can see the plots there. There is a dotted line for the average, the mean of each team. And they're just like, you can barely even see the yellow line because they're right on top of each other. So you can see here this one low game from Frub where they beat the Zombies 15-10. That's their worst game. Is dragging them down. If they had won by a few more points, they would probably be into EUCF. Whereas right now, as the standings go, they're outside. So yeah, Marcha, anything else you got your eyes on here in the mixed division? Want to dig into anything a bit further? Or
one of our ever going on rivals is Reading.
Okay.
Their performance is also quite, say, it differs every year.
Yeah.
They're sometimes really good, sometimes not. So I'm curious how they're doing.
Yeah, so they're 3-3. I think they went to Elite Invite, but seem to have had a mix of results there. So you can see they have a 423-point game, which is when they beat Disconnection 15-10, but also losing to Monchaux, who are not doing that well this season. 13-15 was a negative 234-point game. So very big spread in the rankings. If you compare them, let's see, who could we compare them to? Compare them to Deep Space, for example, who's probably one of their rivals, and see Deep Space is managing to do quite a bit better. Yeah, you can see that it looks like two completely different teams, totally offset from each other in the data. So, yeah, this loss to Monchaux really way below 0, whereas you can see Deep Space doesn't have any games below 0. For those who don't know, 0 is about, not exactly because of how it works, but it's about the average score in the whole system. So the average game in the system is about 0. So getting a few games below that is not so great. So Reading having a not great start to the season, but again, they've only been to one tournament. We'll have to see. Don't need to dig into it too much here unless you maybe know some of the personnel, but we also have this roster tab. I don't know if this was here before, but it is there now where you can actually look at the master roster of any team in case you want to follow somebody or know what team they're on. And you can also look at each event roster. So you can see who they're bringing to whatever event or who they brought to whatever event. And you can also see what tournaments they're planning to play in the season. So right now, like I said, Reading only played Elite Invite, but they also were at UK Regionals. I guess they didn't have any games counted there because that already happened. UK Nationals and the Summer Tour in Birmingham. So still a ways to go. We'll see if they can climb their way back up. I think Reading is the type of program that works really hard on developing a big club. Maybe they'll have a bit more development by later on in the season. We'll see how they do. Okay, I think that's enough for mixed. And we will check the open division next. We'll save women's for last. I know you're probably the most curious about that one, Maartje, but
For sure.
we'll go there last. We can see what's happening here. Actually, right before we do that, I did want to show one more tab, which I haven't shown yet, which is the evolution tab. And I'm actually going to make it filter by the entire season to see what the division looks like. How stable is the top 16? So I have it set here to show any team that made the top 16, show their evolution throughout the season. You can see like this purple team hadn't played a game yet. That's Reading actually. Hadn't played a game yet until I think this was the ranking after Elite Invite. I actually did run a ranking before Windmill and after Windmill, so we didn't do a show about the before Windmill one, but that's also there in the system. I said why not put it in there to see exactly what Windmill did. Zero's mix is actually quite stable. If you look at some of the other divisions, there are loads of teams that started in the top 16 but ended up in like 40th place or something like that. Mixed, quite stable. We can see here Malmö has bounced from inside qualification to outside and then back inside again. Even though I don't think they've played, it's just what's going on around them is moving them around. You see here Zoom, I think right after when they only had the Turkish nationals results, they were actually ranked only 7th, all the way in 7th. But then when they got some of those results at Windmill, they got knocked down to 14th. So we'll see how that evolves over time. Biggest falling team is here out from Hungary. I think before the elite teams played, they were in the top 16, but now they're dropped down to 22. But actually quite stable looking season in the mixed division so far. You would think mixed might be the craziest one, but here looking pretty stable. All right, now we'll move to open. We'll start in the ranking. So yeah, Mooncatchers still in front, 12-0. They played their spring tour and summer tour. I don't think they're planning to play anything else. They're sitting pretty high, almost 100 points above the second place team, which is Clapham. We got La Fota, Wall City, Gentle from Belgium, One Tribe from Bologna, the other Bologna team than La Fota. Ranelagh sitting there at 7th. Chevron Action Flash moved up to 8th. Chalk at 9th. 3SB with the 6-0 record, but having only beaten weaker teams is actually sliding down to 10th now. Costa Rica Grandes are 9-5 from Rimini. 11th. The cutoff from guaranteed in to maybe in. Bristol is sitting there with just a 3-1 ranking for now, but sitting there in 12th place. XVI from Ireland, then Hrutz. Actually, I know a lot of them were watching to see where they would end up because they had a game against Clapham at Windmill that we weren't sure if that was going to push them down a spot or two. I did check. They did move their rating down a bit, but they had quite a good buffer between them and the 15th place, so they still managed to stay in 14th. Bad Skid, I think, were outside the top 16 before, and they've slid in now with a couple good results. I think they had some German tournament where they had a couple really good wins there. I think they beat Wall City there, but Wall City wasn't counting it. But they did play really well, and now are back in the top 16. And Jet Set Open is the last team there in the top 16. Outside, rounding out the top 20, we got Quixotes from Madrid, Is No Good from Paris, Ketchup Graz from Austria, and Frank N from Germany. So, yeah, what are your thoughts looking at this open division here, Maartje?
Yeah, what jumps to me is that quite many teams have quite some games already. Of course, really curious if Grut will make it. Really hoping for that. But if I look around them, like looking down, most teams have already quite many games, so not looking too bad, I would say. So happy to see that. Apart from that, I think it's not that I don't see many big surprises.
Yeah, I think One Tribe is
Just,
the
yeah, One
surprise
Tribe,
from.
haven't heard. No, yeah, true.
Yeah, they're a team from Bologna, and they actually played against La Fota at Italian Nationals, and La Fota always brings split squads to Italian. They play like O and D lines at
Wow.
Italian Nationals because they just crush everybody anyways. Um, and they decided to count, I think, the first weekend one of their games, and One Tribe actually beat whichever team was counting it. I think they could only pick one of them, whether it was their O line or D line. One Tribe beat La Fota 15-9 in that game. Since then, La Fota have not opted to count nationals anymore for the other weekends, but that score did boost One Tribe quite a bit. But they also, we mentioned before, they did quite well at their spring tour as well with a lot of good wins. So of course that La Fota win is a 1,000 point game, which might be the highest ranking game in the system, with a 15-9 win over the third place team in the system. But yeah, they did get good wins over Ketchup Graz at spring tour and also beat Costa Rica Grandes there. I do know that at Italian Nationals for the first time, this isn't to do with the ECS, but those two La Fota split squads lost in semis, and it was Costa Rica versus One Tribe in the final. And I think for the first time since so my friend told me who follows it a lot, says since 2011 that La Fota didn't win Italian Nationals, and Costa Rica from Rimini actually beat One Tribe in the final. So fun things going on in Italy. Maybe La Fota will have to bring their real team to nationals next year if they want to hold on to the Italian title. Yeah, so trying to think if there's anything else to look at here. I mean, one thing I did notice, because I ran that ranking beforehand. Let's see here. If I do this, will it refresh the? Sometimes there's a weird bug where they do this weird thing with my plots. There, I'll put it back. I did notice in the ranking here, you can see this little crossover that after Elite Invite, Clapham was sitting at second, and then because of a bunch of other games, I think maybe there was a game at UK Regionals where Alba didn't do so well, and that was one of their opponents. They actually, La Fota crossed over them to get second right before Windmill. And then with their performance at Windmill, they managed to get themselves back into Windmill. All right, and before I move forward, it says Felix says he has got a question for us. So why don't you put the question on the screen? We'll see if we can answer that one directly. Can you show what Summer Tour is going to look like for the Open Division? Example, which teams might have a shot at the wild card and their ranking is what their ranking is now from Daniela. Yes, we will do that after we do the ranking. That was planned to be in the show. So stay tuned for that answer, Daniela, and we'll be showing you that in a second. I'm sure that all the crit people are very curious about that one. Yeah, and so you can see here the evolution of the Open Division. The Mixed Division, the top 16 was quite solid. But you can see here, what's this orange team? Yeah, Bad Skid. They started off with a spring tour not doing so well, and they've been bouncing up and down all over the place, probably giving themselves a lot of anxiety to see if they can manage to get themselves in that top 16. I do think they will be at one of the summer tours, so they have a chance to just win it out there and make it very clear. But they're bouncing around all over the place. You can see here, what's this? Uprising Ultimate was 15th at one point, and now they're sitting all the way down at 39th. So you can see how the season evolves throughout the year. Let's take a look at the matchups on the edge here. We got Costa Rica Grandes and Bristol. So that's the green versus blue. Curious what that's how close those teams really are to each other. So yeah, again here, close enough to be closer than 14.99 to 15 in an expected game. Again, it looks like Costa Rica Grandes has a lot more data in the system than Bristol does. But spread looks pretty similar. And we did know, yeah, Bristol did beat La Fota 10-9 at Tom's Tourney. So that's really, really helping them out. Big win for them. But also had, again, a loss to Jet Set 14-10. So we'll see what Bristol can do when they hold on to their position if they get more games in the system later this season. And the last cutoff in the Open Division is Jet Set and Quixotes. Let's take a look at them here. We got Jet Set Open and Quixotes. Here again, draw 33-point difference between the two. Very similar looking spreads just from the eye test. Their bottom levels are similar. Their top levels are similar. Just Jet Set doing a little bit better, pushing the average up. Sometimes it's just those little margins. So I do believe, I'm curious, does Quixotes have another I think that both, this is actually a good thing to use for the event thing. I believe both of them are at the summer tour. Must be, is it Chambéry? So at Chambéry, we have Quixotes and Jet Set are both playing at that same summer tour. And right now they're right on the edge. And so if those two teams are playing each other, that game's going to be huge. Could decide which one goes to EUCF or not. So that'll be one to watch out in Chambéry later this season. Great. So any other thoughts you have, Marcha, on this open division? Any other thing you'd like to see here?
Well, to be honest, I'm not really following the open division that much, so not
All
really.
right.
I think you pick more interesting ones.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we already talked about Clapham, Lafota. Actually, I would like to look at Clapham versus Lafota because I think they're quite close. What is causing one team to be over the other? We know Moon is sitting there at the top with their early season results, but Lafota and Clapham, what does one team need to do to get over the other? So they are also sitting at a 10-point difference, very, very thin margins. And you can see here, Lafota with quite a lot of data in the system, but a bigger spread than Clapham. Clapham seems to be playing a bit more consistently, which is weird given the fact that they've been playing with quite different rosters at every tournament they've been going to. But yeah, Lafota just maybe having this bad game. Yeah, lost to one tribe. That's if they didn't have that loss to one tribe, I think they'd probably easily be in second place. So that goes to show you that if you take a game not so seriously, bring a half team to a Italian nationals, how that can hurt you. So maybe teams will figure that out for next year. Okay, March, I think we've talked enough about all the other things. Let's get to the division you care about the most, the one you're playing in. Jinx, Midnight sitting here at the top of the women's division. I think that's, maybe a bit surprising since they did take a 5-4 loss to Hrut, but apparently that wasn't enough to bring them below first place. So winning a lead invite definitely helps, beating all the top teams in Europe there. Shout, second place. Yaka in third. 3SB in fourth. Forenzo, I think they only have their Vienna spring break results in. Hrut now. This must feel very relieving to you to have 9-3, have your 10 games in the system.
Yeah, sure.
That's probably the most relief you needed out of anything. But sitting at fifth place, just above East Block, the other Czech team. Moon Cup in seventh, Ketchup in eighth, Iceni in ninth, Bristol 10th, Fabulous from Switzerland 11th. I believe that's a bit of a slip down. I think they didn't have the best results at Windmill, so that might have knocked them down a couple notches. LMU at 12th, Troubles from Poland at 13th, Jet Set Love at 14th. I'm actually curious. I want to look at them to see if they moved around a bit because they also have quite a lot of games in the system. Box Vienna at 15th, Smog from the UK at 16th. Then we've got Woof from Bruges in Belgium at 17th, Tequila Boom Boom from Rimini 18th, Sharks from Barcelona at 19th, and Seagulls at 20th. I think this one is surprising a lot of people. They were quite a top team. They've made, I think, semis not so long ago at the EUCF, and I've been at the EUCF for a number of times, but the Hamburg outfit not getting themselves in the top 16 with this system so far. So all right, Marcha, let's I'll predict your question to probably look into it and just see what your data looks like, and then we'll get to it. And I'm curious how this data feels to you compared to what we see here. So it says here that your best game of the season is your 15-8 win against Ketchup. Your 5-4 win against Jinx was actually a lower scoring game. This doesn't count the weightings. This is really just the raw score. This counts that game as a less impressive game than the 15-8 win against Ketchup. Ketchup are a decent team, and you beat them by a huge margin, so that's how that works. Fabulous here, your next best wins. So these are some of your top games. We round out your bottom games. Of course, you beat Fly High 15-4, but you couldn't. No matter how badly you beat them, it was going to be this score. So that's why that blowout rule exists, because that game shouldn't hurt you just because they are so far below you that it would have hurt you no matter what you did. But your worst game that counts was your loss to Shout at Spring Tour 10-15, and then your other loss to Shout, your next worst result. Your win against Sick, again, we can ignore the blowout ones because those don't really count. Fabulous was your win, was your 13-11. That was your worst result. So I'm curious, does this feel at all right, or do you feel like this is totally out of whack? I mean, here you're Jinx, you're this big final at Windmill. Um, maybe you think that's the best game your team ever played, and it's the algorithm's saying differently. So, what are your thoughts here? Curious.
Yeah, so I think what the downside that you see from the algorithm here is that we've played some like lower ranked teams, and that's not really helping us. So even for example, against with like it's helping us, but maybe
Well,
not
it's
that
below
much
your
as
average. Everything below your average is hurting you. You can think of it that way. So that game is
yeah,
actually
yeah,
hurting you.
yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just really hard to win with a big difference, because
Mm-hmm.
especially mentally you have you really have to prepare yourself to perform even though it feels like it's not needed to win, which also makes the season more interesting because every game becomes really interesting. So it's both nice about it but also not so nice about it. Yeah, and what just really annoys me is these games against Shout, because yeah, they were both yeah our first tournament,
Mm-hmm.
and that tournament the only really good team we played. So at Spring Tour,
Yeah.
yeah, and really our first real matchup against a good team. So with a new team, um, and yeah, then that just really hurts you. So I would love to play them like 3 times more and make up for this score. Um, but yeah, I mean, that's not the algorithm's fault. This is just how seasons work, I guess. So
Uh-huh.
um, yeah, and what really surprises me is that the game against Ketchup has such a big impact. Um, and I think it just shows if you're on a roll. Like, because if I remember this game, it wasn't really that easy, but I feel like at some point we just got a lot of turns in a row.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it shows that it's really important not to give up and keep going. But yeah, sometimes it just doesn't work anymore, and then you're screwed with this algorithm. So good for us, probably less good for them.
But do you think like beating Ketchup 15-8 is was probably that doesn't feel like 300 points harder than losing to Jinx Side Universe, I guess.
No, exactly. Because also this win didn't feel that big. It's just at some point you just suddenly get a lot of points in one go, but
Mm-hmm.
then the game is already won, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel that special. But yeah, this final against Jinx, that was like I think the highest level we've ever played as team.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the game at against GP as well, but that one doesn't count unfortunately. Uh, but yeah, so if there would be a way to count, for example, also how important games are, like
Mm-hmm.
fine,
So,
I would
yeah.
say beating someone in a final is more special than beating someone in a pool game,
Okay.
because that at the end what when it really counts, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
Yeah, and there's nothing
just
in here
make also
about
just
like
makes it more complicated. So
yeah,
not sure
there's
if
nothing
that's a
in here
good
about
idea.
like placement at the tournament or anything like that. We just take them as game data and treat them all exactly the same, which, like you say, of course, is of course not how it feels. I mean, playing a bracket play game, an elimination game at Windmill compared to playing a pool play game at Spring Tour, those aren't the same thing. And but the algorithm does count them as the same thing. Um, but yeah, like you said, then you'd have to make some kind of arbitrary decision that how do you count one versus the other. And I think especially the complication in Europe is with all these tournaments that we want to still exist. We want Windmill. We don't want Windmill and Tom's and Vienna Spring Break and all these great tournaments that have been put on by these great tournament organizers in Europe. We want to have those games, those tournaments count, but then we can't. We don't. But for them to allow them to be who they are, we don't want to impose on them that they have to take EUCS teams only, or they have to. We got a chance to see the American national team come to Windmill, and we don't want to have to. Change. If Windmill wasn't Windmill, they wouldn't be coming. If that was just like an EUCS tournament, USA national team wouldn't be coming, right? So
Mhm.
to find that balance of how we can make it all work is quite a challenge. And yeah, again, we're open to any feedback if people think we should do things differently. There will be a feedback form coming out shortly because we have a meeting coming up in July with the competition committee. So definitely let us know how you think it's going. It's an experiment this year. Yeah. Okay, so this is Krutz. You want to look at your plot. I'm curious if this shows how you're played at season, and this is interesting because it looks maybe this is exactly what you want as a team. It looks like you're improving, especially for a first year team. This kind of makes sense that you're like this is your spring tour average kind of box, and then of course at Tom's Tourney you only had one game count really because this game became a blowout rules didn't count the sick game. And then Windmill, you can see like a nice little trend. Does that feel does that feel right to you as how the season was going?
Yeah, it also, it represents how the season is going. I also think the left one shows again play against the low ranked teams that we just didn't win that big as we should have back then. Which also just comes with start of the season making more mistakes, and I think we've been really cleaning that up. So yeah, it shows progress. It shows a bit more progress than we probably made in real life, but yeah, I recognize it at least.
Cool. Anything else? Now you get a chance to dig into any team that you're curious about here, or any matchups you want to see. Why are you ranked below a certain team, or why another team is ranked above another team? Anything surprising you in this ranking, based on how the season's been going?
Yeah. So what's interesting to me is we haven't really played Yaka, for example, and yeah, 3SB we've played. We won, but it didn't count. Yeah, so about these, I'm curious how they've been doing. The ones that are close.
So let's compare you. It's the special privileges you get coming on the show as a guest. We get to dig deep into your team. We got Krut versus you wanted to do Yaka?
Yeah.
So the two Pala Boss teams matching up. We'll see what what it looks like. So here you can see at least what the plots look like. Yeah, you can say like your game history. You haven't played against each other. But yeah, I think this is you all. You see a few blowout games that would have hurt you. But Yaka, I think, has the lowest low teams, which again are your losses to Shout. They don't have games that are that low. Their lowest game here is their loss to Jinx 12-9, which since Jinx is ranked a bit higher than Shout, doesn't hurt them as much as your losses to Shout do. Looks like their top game, beating East Block, which is quite a high-ranked team, 15-8. That seems to be a bit higher than what you've been able to do. You haven't managed a game that high yet. So yeah, this is you all versus Yaka. And you said 3SB?
Yeah.
Since you did beat them. And yeah, of course, not that much data there. Your highest highs are better than their highest highs, but their lowest game is a 15-4 win over Sharks. So they beat up on the teams there, 15-11 over Fabulous, 12-7 over Troubles, and 12-7 over Catch Up. So yeah, this is what the two teams look like compared to each other right now.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, then let's look at the lower ranked teams.
Okay.
Around 16th.
Yeah, let's do Troubles versus Jet Set first to see this, the first cutoff. Jet Set, I know, actually they went to, they're counting everything. With Jet Set is doing it the way we wish every team would do it. They're just basically counting everything they do. I think they've been to Tom's, Windmill, and Spring Elite Invite and Spring Tour, and they're going to a Summer Tour, and they're just counting all the games. So I like that because that gives us tons of data on them. And you can see again they have a pretty high game. Their win against Fabulous 15-11, but yeah, also this low game loss to Tequila Boom Boom 10-12, which I think that one was an interesting one because I think Tequila Boom Boom, to me actually at Spring Tour when I saw them, they looked quite good on day one and then seemed to not do as well on day two. And I think Jet Set caught them when they were doing well, and then when a team does well at the beginning and worse later, that can like drag you down, right? So I feel like they got a little unlucky there. You see Troubles has a loss to Catch Up 15-6, which was this one. No, okay, that was a different team. as their worst game, their best game, win against Fabulous 13-11. So pretty close between those two, but Troubles, of course, much less data, so much more room to move around, whereas Jet Set, they are playing at least one more tournament, but so they'll have 6 more games in the system, but of course, the more data you already have in, the less you're likely to move your strength as much, whereas these ones are going to move around a bit. So that's cutoff number 1. Cutoff number 2 is Smog and Woof. I think you played both of these teams, or you were at a tournament with both these teams. I don't know if you played them, but
yeah, at least one of them, yeah. Smog we didn't play, I think. Wolf
okay,
we
maybe
did.
yeah. Well, wait, Smog Open was at Grenoble. I don't know if Smog Women were actually there. Okay, yeah, this one a draw between the two teams, 4 points rating difference, and if this was the end of the season, this would be the difference between qualifying or not qualifying. So, what's the big difference here? See, yeah, the highest high is on Wolf's side with the 15-7 win over Sick, but lowest low, LMU losing 7-13 there. Smog losing 10-11 to Sick, which was, yeah, this was interesting that, like, yeah, we played the same team. I beat them 15-7 and you lost to them 10-11, but you're still ranked right above me. Have they played each other? No, they didn't play each other. Yeah, so it just seems very, very razor thin between these teams. These spreads look pretty similar to me. So it's going to suck. I mean, this is what I'm curious what's going to come down. We've had a lot of positive feedback about the system so far. I'm curious when something like this happens at the end of the season and one of these teams gets to go and one of these teams doesn't get to go. And then you start to think about, yeah, if you tweak the algorithm a bit, would one team have gone and the other one not? So I'm curious what kind of feedback we're going to get at the end of the year when this will be the deciding factor of who gets to go to UCF and who doesn't. Great. So one last thing I wanted to take a look at is what teams have their 10 games or not. So we can go that division by division. We'll stay in the women's for right now. Who has their 10 games? So it's actually only 8 teams now that have done their 10 games. Of course, we still have the summer tour, so many teams are going to get 6 more games in there. But notably, Jinx is not going to a summer tour tournament, and they only have their 9 games so far. So I do hope for them that they manage to get a game out. I do know that I believe if you look at them, there's another thing you can do and check and see a team. If you go to their roster page, you can check which tournaments they're going to. So this is Jinx Midnight. They are going to German Nationals Weekend 1. And I think that if I go to check that here, are any other teams going? It does seem that Seagulls is there. So hopefully in that weekend, they match up with each other so Jinx can get their last game in. Yaka's another one who has no more EUF tournaments on their calendar. They are going to London Invite this coming weekend, and they only have 6 games there. And I'm curious in London which teams are counting it. It seems that there's only 4 teams counting it, so they only have 3 opponents there that are counting it. So I'm curious if they'll manage to get 4 more games in there at London Invite. Yeah, 3SB, like I said, they have 6 more games at the summer tour, sorry, so they will get their 10 without a problem. Some other top teams, East Block, I think they're also probably going to a summer tour. Yeah, they're going to summer tour, so they'll be fine. So I think most teams in this top area will be all right. Let's take a quick look at Open. How many teams there have 10 games only? Looks like more than 10 games. It's 14 teams at the moment. And are there any top teams that are not quite there yet? We see Wall City's not there, but they are going to a summer tour, I know. Gentle, I believe, as well. One Tribe sitting there, also going to a summer tour. They should be fine. Ranelagh as well. 3SB doing the summer tour thing. So at least all the teams in green by the end of the summer tour aren't at risk of not getting their games in. Yeah, so I think in the open division doesn't seem to be as scary with teams like Jinx and Yaka in the women's division maybe not making it in. So last mixed, I think this one's actually pretty funny. Right now, there's only 2 teams that have that have their 10 games in already at this point in the season, and I'm not sure team to team. I mean, heck, they like we said, they're newish to the season, anyways. right now they only have UK regionals and summer tour. So if that goes that way, they'll just have 7 games in, and they will not qualify for the EUCF. So I'm curious what they're planning to do. Otherwhere down the line, I believe most of these other teams are planning to go to at least a summer tour. I'm trying to think if I know off the top of my head anyone that's not planning to do that. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see how things go. Zoom maybe probably doing a summer tour, nothing else. They only have 3 games in, so they're going to have to get one more in the system to get themselves a qualifying spot. All right, that's it. Anything else from the rankings you're interested in, or should we move on to the closing thoughts on the show?
Yeah, so what I'm still interested in is in looking at these evolutions a bit better.
Okay.
I really like that.
Cool. Did you want to see anything, or you just like that it's there?
Yeah, so I really like that it's there. I mean, we looked at it, I think, for mix, and it seems like it's quite stable. So I'm curious if that's also for the other divisions like that.
Yeah, so here's women's. You can see that I think you can see that there's the pre-elite invite and the post-elite invite situation. So pre-elite invite, of course, a number of teams hadn't played yet. But then once we got to elite invite, and we've added all the tournaments since then, there's been almost no movement. Just a couple teams crossing over. So you can see that Yaka and Shout crossed over from each other. Yaka was in second place up until Windmill, and then interesting enough, because neither Yaka or Shout were at Windmill, but from before Windmill to after Windmill, they swapped places, probably because their opponents did well or not. Here's another cross. We have Iceni and Ketchup. Also, we're not at Windmill, but they crossed over. So Windmill, all it did was move teams that didn't go to Windmill in the ranking, weirdly enough.
But I think what's nice to see here is that you kind of have what you want, right? The more games you have, the more stable it becomes. So
yeah,
as a mathematician, I like that because it means that it's fair. That nothing. It means that if there's no big changes anymore, seems that the algorithm is doing its job.
Nice. All right, and yeah, so I think we did look at the open, but we'll take a quick look at it again. I think that one is also, like I said, a bit messier. Some teams really swinging out from the beginning of this. The beginning of the season should be a realm of chaos. There's not enough data to really get a good see what's there. But what's interesting, I think I expected that some teams would, start at the top 16 but go way down. That's not super surprising. What is surprising to me is Bad Skid doing badly at Spring Tour and then them going into it. That seems a lot more difficult. This seems like, okay, the good teams weren't in the system yet. Bad Skid did the opposite. More teams came in, and then that seemed to give a different view on how good their results were at Spring Tour. So it can go both ways with the system.
Yeah, so this looks like they need some more games.
Yeah, but I think it's more than leading some more games. So if you look from here to here, so if we only look at this part of the top 16, then it looks a bit more stable. So this is once there were more games in the system, things kind of, after Elite Invite, I think things kind of settled down a little bit. It's the pre-Elite Invite where many of the top 8 teams didn't play any of the spring tours in Open. They weren't even in the system yet, and so that was made things a bit wild, and so the top 16 was not really stable. Back then, my team UFO was in top 20, and right now we're not sitting anywhere near that at the moment. So,
but it's interesting to have a look after the season because you can evaluate how many games you actually need to have a reliable result, right?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, one more thing. I promised Daniela, so we'll look at that now. What are the summer tours looking like? So I think it's good to look division by division a little bit so that we know which teams might be worried about this. So if we look here, these teams in blue might not qualify if the summer tours if a wild card goes outside the top 16, which means a team wins summer tour that's outside the top 16, then these blue spots aren't safe. So what do the summer tours look like for mixed? Stay with this left column over here. We've got Birmingham. So there we got BN1, Deep Space, Glasgow, Lemmings, Oxford, Reading, and Thundering Herd. So we have at least Glasgow, Lemmings, and Deep Space that are in the top 16, as well as Reading. So I think it's probably unlikely that a team from outside the top 16 wins this one. There's enough good teams here that it's probably not So one of those blue spots is probably safe, I would say. But you never know. In one tournament, some random team could win. Nobody thought Lemmings was going to win Elite Invite, so you never know what's going to happen. Let's see. Then the next one we have is the Warsaw mixed one. We have, I cannot pronounce this name, so sorry to my my Polish friends. Here's Flying Disc, Flo Wrocław, Malmö Mosquitoes, which has been doing very, very well this season. Out Pelt is definitely a top 16 team right now. Sky This is in the top 16. We got Savage and Pelt, Steamhuck, Tartu, which is another team that's not in the top 16 right now, but last year was a semifinals mixed team, and Zombies. So if I were a mixed team, I wouldn't feel too safe about this one because I think like Mosquitoes has been really good this season, but I know that Tartu, when they played Elite Invite, they had only had like 3 outdoor practices before then because Estonia starts their outdoor season so late. So I could see Tartu like having a bad first Elite Invite and then winning this tournament, but then maybe not being good enough to get in the top 16 because they're not even, are they even in the top 20 right now? They are, yeah, they're at 20th place. So they could like win this tournament, not be in the top 16, but then take a wild card away from one of the top 16. Though, of course, if they get a win over a team that is right now sitting at 4th, maybe that'll be enough to put them in the top 16 anyways. But yeah, this could cause some spice in the division, I would say, going forward. Then in Freiburg mixed, we've got Colorado, Disconnection, Fireball, Hessisch Erdferkel, Heck. We mentioned them, sitting at 2nd place right now. Nullakt, Remix, Saskadistis, The Owls, Tiefsee Tauscher, and Wiener Mischung, Zoom. I'd be pretty confident if I were a mixed division team that Tiefsee Tauscher is probably going to win. They seem way better than everybody so far when they're playing top European competition. I mean, Seski could also win. Seski's also a very strong team. So, but anyways, I think this one will go to a top 16 team. So if I were a mixed division team, I would say 2 of these spots seem pretty safe. One of them, we'll see. We'll see.
But Tartu might do good enough as well to go
Yeah.
up in the ranking. Quite confident about that if they bring their good players.
Yeah, I think they will. I think they I know some people on the team, and they knew that going into Elite Invite they weren't ready yet. So they are, yeah. And of course, that's the weird thing is like, yes, you can win a wild card down here somewhere, but of course, if you win a tournament, you're also going to get a bunch of wins on your season. So, like, could they really win and stay outside the top 16? We'll have to see. That's the fun of the season. Open's a bit crazier because there are a lot of wild cards. There are 5 wild cards that we have not yet assigned yet. And so these teams all sitting there wondering what's it going to look like for them. So let's look at some of these open division summer tours. You've got Malmö, where we have Aarhus, Frisbees, Hardfish, KFK, Örebro, Malmö, Otso, Piru, and Ranala. So I believe Ranala is the only team in the top 16 here. I would definitely say, I mean, there's some teams here, like Otso is doing pretty low in the ranking, but are actually, I think, a pretty good team. We're missing some players. So they could definitely steal it, maybe. KFK, where's KFK? They're traditionally a pretty strong team. They're sitting at 24th, so... and Ranala is only a 7th place team, I think. So there's no team here, like winning this tournament might not push the team into the top 16. I would definitely say this one is not safe. If I was a 16th place team in Open, I would not feel too confident that this one is going to definitely go to a top 16 team. In Chambéry, we have Blackbirds, Flying Angels, Jet Set, Krakens, Monkey, One Tribe, and Quixotes. So One Tribe, a team that's definitely in close to the top of the ranking, but again, being a little bit buoyed by a 15-9 win against La Fota. Quixotes and Jet Set are both teams on the bubble. One of them's 15, or one of them 16, one of them 17. So spicy, but also definitely. Well, I guess it'd be unlikely that if one of these 3 teams wins it, they would be outside the top 16. But could happen. Could be that like a 17th place team ends up winning this tournament, and that could take one of the wild cards outside, which would be very interesting. So. Definitely going to keep my eye on that Krakens Quixotes game. I hope we get a stream of that one, because that one could be, even though it's not like the top level, it like might be the game that matters of who gets to go to EUCF and who doesn't get to go to EUCF. So definite intrigue there. Ternava, we've got 3SB, Armada, Ketchup Graz, Forward, Outseaters, Panthers Wrocław, Terrible Monkeys, and Uprising. I think that 3SB and Ketchup seem quite above the rest here in the rankings so far. Outseaters, where were they? I think they were also not bad. They were 27th. So Ketchup, if they win it, yeah, there's definitely a lot of volatility, a lot of possibility for teams to outside the top 16 to win a wild card. So yeah, these teams in blue, I wouldn't feel too safe if I were an open division team, which sadly Hrut is sitting there at 14th. So hopefully no more than 2 of them go outside that level. Leicester got Alba, Bristol, Chevy, Dublin, Kapow, Rebel, Smashed, Smog, Uproar, and XVI. Honestly, I don't see like Chevron has been so strong this season. I don't see them losing this tournament. Bristol has been okay, but if they win, they're also a top 16 team. So this one seems safe to me. Then finally in Germany, we have Sieben Schwaben, Arsudendi, Bad Skid, Franken, Free Speed, Frizzly Bears, Gentle, Heidi's, Panthers, and Wall City. This one, we've got teams like Wall City, Bad Skid, and Gentle that are all very, very high up in the rankings. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Heidi's really put everything into this tournament because I think they're sitting a little bit outside the rankings, 21st. Really go for it and try to win this one. But yeah, it'd be hard to get over Gentle, Wall City, and Bad Skid. So this one should be interesting, but pretty safe. Lastly, we've got the women's division. So which teams are sitting there in blue at the moment? Got Jet Set, Box, and Smog. What do their summer tours look like? We've got we have one here. Sorry, this is spring tour. Gone too far. Summer tour. We've got Aarhus, Atletico, Copenhagen Hucks, Gravity, Malmö, Seagulls, Smog, and Spice. Atletico, an interesting one. Hasn't had a single game yet in the system. Don't know if they're planning to get 4 more games in before summer tour, but if they don't, they're a pretty strong team. Could see them winning this tournament. And the rule is if a team that doesn't have 10 games wins the wild card, it just becomes a ranking bid. We don't give to the second place team or anything like that. So this wild card could evaporate, which would be good for the teams in blue. That we see teams like Seagulls that have traditionally been good, but this season in 20th place. So they definitely will be hungry here. And I think they have a good shot, actually. I think they could win this tournament. So this is going to be a weird one, Malmö Summer Tour. In Chambéry, we got Fly High Louvres, Jet Set, Queen Kong, Sharks, Sick, Tequila, Woof, and Swarm. Another one where this is a bit of a weaker field. Tequila Boom Boom, like we said, just outside of the ranking. Jet Set, just inside the ranking. Woof, they're just outside as well. So not a bubble teams here, and this will definitely be one to see who can fight their way in for the guaranteed spot. Definitely team's going to be trying really hard there. And finally, a small tournament in the East, 3SB, Box Vienna, East Block, Fabulous, Outseaters, and Troubles. I would guess that the Czech teams look a bit stronger. Fabulous maybe could also get a shot at it in Box. I definitely don't see this one going outside the top 16 since most of these teams are in the top 16 except for Outseaters. So that's it for looking at those tournaments. And we'll close out the show with the questions block, Q&A. Nemo, maybe you can pull up some questions for us, for Marcha and I to answer. Do we know how seeding for Euros... Whoop, there we go. Do we know how seeding for Euros will work? Will it be snake-seeded pools or some randomness, i.e. split into groups of 4 by ranking, randomly select a team from each group per pool? What we're going to do is the top 4... So the seeding will be based on ranking. So the top 16 will be ranked seeded that way. But we're not going to do the pools just a straight snake. The top 4 teams will each be the top seeds of each pool in order from A to D. That's locked in. And then there'll be pots of teams underneath that. So 9 to 12 will be in one pot, and they will be randomly assigned to a pool from A to D. Then the next set, 5 to 8 will be in a pool. Then 9 to 12, and then 13 to 16. So the top 4 will make sure that they don't have to play another top 4 team in their pool, but the other ones are going to be somewhat randomly distributed like we traditionally do for the UF. What are your thoughts on that, Marcha? Do you like the real snaking, or do you like a little bit of fun for the the pot draw?
So the first 2 teams move on to next rounds then of the pool. How does it work?
That I'm not so sure about. That's the format. This is about how the pools go. I believe the way it usually works is the top teams go to quarters directly, and then the 2 and 3 there are crossovers. So you can still make the bracket if you get second or third in
Okay.
the pool.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Then, I mean, I think actually because the ranking is done over such a long period, it would make sense to make it an advantage if you become fifth or eighth. So I would actually
Snake it.
prefer that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if we fully decide on it. I think we're probably going with the pot draw, but March is saying we should do it another way. Good to get some different opinions on the show.
But at the end, I mean, it's about that last weekend anyway. That's the final. So
Yeah.
as long as there's a chance out, if you're playing against that number one team, yeah,
Yeah.
that's okay, I would say.
Yeah. And we do have it so, of course, like the 1 seed won't face the 2 seed until the final if they win all their games, of course. And it'll be a 1v4, 2v3 semi if that goes well. So at least that's kind of locked in as long as there's no upsets, which, of course, there always are, some 1 or 2 of them. But yeah. Other questions, Nemo? No more questions at the moment. So I think we can close the show out. A couple last thoughts. Upcoming tournaments this weekend. We've got London Invite. 4 teams signed up, I think all in the women's division. French Nationals and German Mixed Nationals coming up a little later than that. Then we got Discus Cologne and UKU Nationals. So I think we're kind of getting close to wrapping up the season, except for those last summer tours, as I don't think there's as much Ultimate going on in July and August compared to, May to June. So we won't have the show. I think we're going to do a show on July 15th, right after the transfer window closes, to talk about all these tournaments and how that shaped the rankings, but probably won't run a ranking until then. And just to close things down, a couple more housekeeping notes. If you don't have an EUCS pass, they can purchase the Showdown bundle to gain access to the second half of the EUCS. That's a discounted price than the full season. And of course, as we said before, the beginning of the season is now going to be free from July onwards. There's a competition committee work weekend in mid-July. Mentioned that a couple times. There will be a questionnaire sent out shortly to probably all the team admins. So please give us your feedback. We know this is a new system. If you have any ideas for how we can improve it for next year, how it can work better, please let us know. There's also a call for bids. Maybe Nemo can put the link up on the screen. ultimafederation.eu/news/call for bids EUCS 2025. They're looking for hosts for next year. They have specific dates, but we'll favor that they would favor, but feel free to submit events outside of that time frame so that we can take a look at potential hosts. So please, if you want to host an EUCS event, maybe you really want to save money, like Marcha said, I don't want to go out there. The best way you can do that, host an event, and then you don't have to travel too far to play it. So definitely we're looking for as many good hosts as we can. And so the next show will be on July 16th, as I mentioned. And that'll do for In and Out. Thank you so much to Marcha for coming on the show. And we'll see you all in July.
Thank you for having me.